Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back FETC Program Director, Patrick Gallagher.
I'm on top of the world, eh? I'm on top of the world, eh? Waiting on this for a while now.
Good morning. I'm glad to see you all back this morning, raring to go. Well, at least in mind anyway, right? Maybe the body might be a little bit tired this morning, but we've got a great keynote to wake you up, get you thinking. But before that, it's been a great 3 days, interactive workshops, engaging keynotes, informative sessions, some so popular that we actually had to call in for extra chairs and get approval by the fire marshal, so that's always a good thing. Fire marshal doesn't think so. But just a couple of reminders before we get started. The exhibit hall is open this morning, 9:30 to 3 o'clock. Make sure that you're heading into the hall and you're getting registered for that $30,000 Lenovo giveaway. I always ask this question, is anybody out here who doesn't want $30,000 of technology for their school? Raise your hand. I don't see anybody. So that's going to be drawn at 2:45 today in booth 621. So you need to get into the exhibit hall, get registered. You have to go to 3 locations, get scanned. Takes you about, I don't know, probably take you about a half hour, and then spend time walking around that show floor as well. Don't miss our poster sessions, Aspire sessions, learning labs, STEM demo classrooms. All of these are going on in the exhibit hall. So this is in addition to the sessions going on in the conference areas, along with content and product information from our exhibitor vendors. Okay, let's move on to the main event, our innovations keynote. Sierra Leone native, engineer, designer, lyricist, rapper, David Sengeh will finish his PhD next year at MIT Media Labs in the biomechatronics group, focusing on the design of comfortable prosthetic sockets and wearable interfaces. While David was at Harvard as an undergraduate, he focused on making a stable vaccine against tuberculosis for optimal lung delivery. He has worked in over 15 countries on projects related to education, healthcare delivery, and medical devices. David is also, in his spare time, a social entrepreneur as the president and co-founder of the international NGO Global Minimum Incorporated and owner and lead designer of Nyali Clothing. David has won the Lemelson Award, MIT National Student Prize. He's a 2013 Forbes 30 Under 30 in Technology, as well as a member of the Wired Smart List. And he is a 2014 TED Fellow. Talking this morning on teaching today's students to be learners, makers, and problem solvers, please join me in inviting David to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that generous and kind introduction. And thank you for waking up and coming to this keynote. As a reward, if you look under your seats right now, I'm just kidding. Somebody else does that. But today, we will be talking about some of the reasons why we want young people to be makers. And at the end, there are 2 mics here, so please think about any comments and questions. And I actually do want to learn from you as well and from your experiences. So feel free to step on and share that with your colleagues here. And I know that there's a lot of talent in the room. But why do we do this anyway? Why are we here? Why does anybody wake up in the morning at 7 and come to listen to somebody talk about youth learning? My whys started when I was much, much younger, and I grew up in Sierra Leone, in Bo and then Freetown. And my parents I had a fun game with my dad, where every day he came from work, I'll sit with him and ask him series of questions. I'll have to create my own riddles to ask him to explain. And when he tells me I was wrong, I'll have to ask him many whys. But I had an uncle who did not quite like this. And so when he would be telling the story, every time I go to him, the minute I open my mouth to say, he asked me to leave. And with this particular uncle, I was not allowed to ask wise when he told any stories. But actually, that was not just when I was a kid. Just as of last week on a WhatsApp chat with some of my friends, somebody said, David, this is the reason why I never want to answer your questions, because there's always many more questions afterwards. Just before I left Sierra Leone, about when I was 17, there were lots of amputees who sat by the roadside. People assumed that they just wanted to beg. People assumed that they were giving prostheses for free, and the reason why they were not using those prostheses was because they wanted to do exactly that. Sit by the roadside in Freetown and beg for money. But why would anybody do that? I asked. And so I went to the camp where these amputees were and asked, why are you not using your prosthesis? And had a long conversation about this. So I moved to the US and I went to my undergrad professors and I said, look, there are these amputees in Sierra Leone who are very uncomfortable and they don't use their prosthesis and they have pressure sores and they have blisters. And that's why they don't use their prosthesis. Is there anything we can do? And at that time, my professor said, no, I work on something else. So we ended up working on the vaccines. But I always wanted to create a space where any amputee whose prosthesis were uncomfortable will come and change their prosthesis, especially if they were a growing child. As you grow and your body changes, you will need new prosthesis because the old ones don't fit much, because we change bodies every day ourselves, and that affects how our prosthesis fits on our body, which affects our livelihood. So I figured, why wouldn't you just have a bank where somebody can come and put their prosthesis, get a new one, change it, and then go back. Did my undergrad, and by the time I was about to finish, I really did not know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I was having a conversation with another mentor of mine. And I said, look, I don't know what I want to do. I don't necessarily want to go to school again, but I just don't want to do some random work. And I want to do something else, something meaningful. And he said, what are the things that you're passionate about? What questions do you have that are unanswered? And I said, actually, 4 years ago, I thought I wanted to do a prosthetics lab, a place, a bank where people can go to change their prosthesis. And he introduced me to somebody who's now my professor at the MIT Media Lab. So I met with Professor Hugh Herr, who's a double amputee himself. When he was 17, he lost his legs in a climbing accident. I went to meet him and I said, hey Hugh, I really want to do something with prosthesis. I want to build this bank, this place where people can go to change their prosthesis. And we had a long conversation, and at the end he said, that wouldn't work. That is not a good idea. And I said, why? Why is that not a good idea? What's the reason? And he said, because every patient requires that they have a comfortable prosthetic socket. And the prosthetic socket is the part in which you can insert your residual limb. So that's the residual limb. The socket is where your leg goes into, that connects to the prosthetic leg. Same on that side. And he said, the way prosthetic sockets are made today mean they are not very comfortable. Even if you are like him, who wears a bionic ankle, he still has pressure sores. And there are still many days where he wakes up and does not want to go to lab because he's uncomfortable. Much like those guys who were sitting on the street side in Sierra Leone, or anybody who's wearing any one of those legs that are designed in India. So it actually didn't matter where a person was found. The one thing that was universal was that they were all in pain. They all experienced discomfort because they had pressure sores, they had blisters, and there was way too much loading in their prosthesis. Part of the reason is how the prosthetics is made, and because we're human and our bodies change. The way the prosthetics is made is so that's a carbon fiber one in the center image. You take the patient's limb, you squeeze it, you feel it. These prosthetics are great. You get better with experience. You feel the person's leg, check where the bone is, modify the mold, the male plug of the person's leg, and then just test a bunch of prostheses until the person says, sure, it's uncomfortable, or until they are bored and just want to go home. Either way, the patient goes home with something that is not the optimal solution. And so I said, okay, if this is the case, then why shouldn't we solve this? Why is nobody working on this? What had happened was just about the time I was having that conversation with him, a series of technological advancements meant we could ask new questions. Questions like, could we 3D print interfaces for the human body? And if we could 3D print interfaces for the human body using data, could we capture that data in a way that is repeatable? So could we use MRI to capture the anatomy of the patient's body? And wait, if we can do that, could we write optimizations and modeling where software is advanced enough that we can create a segment of the person's actual body, do simulations on those that define the design solutions? These were three different fields. My background, I was working on vaccines at the time, not my field. And I asked him, but why couldn't we do that? Why couldn't we combine a bunch of these different areas, a bunch of these different fields and questions, and understand what was best in each one of these categories, combine those to make a prosthetic that was most comfortable? So in this case here, the colorful image on your left is from a modeling where the socket is designed from the patient's anatomy, and each color there is a different material determined by the results of the optimization that are custom to the patient's body, and that's a patient wearing the prosthetic socket that was 3D printed entirely from their body. Now, when I started this work, I think 4 years ago, I went into the lab just before I started, and I spoke to some of the graduate students who were there and said, why is nobody working on sockets? If it's the most important piece, if it determines that a patient will use their prosthesis, whether it's bionic or not. And the answer I got was, oh, it's difficult, nobody does that. No, you don't want to do that. And one of the things I've learned is that if we are willing to ask why, if we are willing to accept that we don't know the answers and we are not experts, I am not an expert in soft tissue modeling, I am not an expert in medical imaging, I am not an expert in 3D printing and design, but I know enough of all of those three things that I can combine the best of what each one of those different fields are to create a product that neither one of them could. And so what is important is that we are, in our learning environments, creating devices and products that are made from the best of multiple different fields. But that's what happens in Boston. That's what happens in the Media Lab. That's what I do. That's what other graduate students like me do. They are interdisciplinary. They ask questions that other people might not want to ask because we don't know the answers to those questions, because they want to explore and create and learn and do stuff and hack. And one of the best things I like about my colleagues is you can come Actually, true story. My lab mate comes into me 2 days ago and he has a video on his phone, and I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, this weekend I was thinking that I've never made a motto, so I was talking to another friend, and she was like, well, why don't you just do it?" So he went to the store and bought all the parts and made a motto there, right, in the lab. But that's what curiosity, that's what the desire to want to learn and the desire to accept, the acceptance that I don't know the answer, but I'm willing to ask and go find it. That's what it enables. Every day I go to the lab, I speak to people much like yourselves. People say, you can't do this. People say it is possible. People say, but why? But why not? But when I'm home, it's a different conversation. When I'm in Sierra Leone, the conversation is not, but why you, David, cannot go and problem solve. This image is outside my house. The conversation that I have every day when I leave my premise is, hey, if you want to solve poverty really, you should ask Action Aid. You need Action Aid to end poverty together. Oh, if you want a solution for a water well, you must call World Vision. Why not? The conversations we have about problem solving and innovation and aid and development are not conversations that lead people like myself, where I come from, empowered to go and problem solve. It takes away the experience of learning. It takes away the joy of problem solving. And most importantly, it takes away the self-efficacy of the individual, especially the youth. A couple of friends and I thought this was just unfair. This does not make sense. I cannot believe in this life on one end in Boston that tells me I can do whatever I want to do when I go and ask questions of people who I don't know because they are experts in it, and use their knowledge to do and apply it in a different field and come up with something new. But yet, on this other end, when I'm home, I'm having conversations about help coming externally to problem solve for other people. So what do? We started a Youth Innovation Challenge in 2012. And this was going to be a national challenge. The organization is Global Minimum, which is run by a bunch of 20-something-year-olds. And we started this when we were in high school. And what the innovation challenges are is that we ask young people to think about the challenge, tell us how they want to solve that challenge in their community, develop solutions for those challenges, build the curiosity and ask why, and then in return we give them mentorship, we give them access to some resources, financial, and we give them a platform for them to learn, a platform for them to collaborate, and a platform for them to go and test their ideas. But all we ask, all we insist on is that there is an impact broader than the individual. That it must be at a scale that touches other people's lives. That there must be learning in there. That you are innovating, and the key to this word for me, which sometimes it's lost its meaning because everybody throws it around all the time, is that you yourself are learning in the process. Now, as an organization, we look to make sure that these teams of youth are doing all of these things. And when we started in 2012 in Sierra Leone, we had about 300 students who were submitting about 70 ideas to create actual tangible solutions in their communities. One of the key things that we stress is in some way something we are just beginning to express, which is an extension of DIY, really, which is DIY. And the extension there is that it must be collaborative. You use the same ethos and the same motivations, but you add the requirement that there is some collaboration and cooperation amongst the teams, and the impact must be beyond the individual. The impact, it's about the group, a collective, not just the individual. Why do we do this? Well, one of the things that's very clear from all of our lives, and you can attest to that if you are a maker, is that we need curiosity. We need to be curious about something and find out just a little bit more, and find out just a little bit more, and find out just a little bit more, to be able to really understand what it requires for us to build an FM radio station like Kelvin did in 2012, so that he can do something with it, so that he can create an avenue for young people in his community to listen to the football game that is happening in the neighborhood field, so that he can be a commentator there, so that he can create an avenue where young musicians in his neighborhood who wouldn't otherwise have airplay can play tracks on his FM radio station. He's only able to do that because he has a sustained curiosity that takes him from when he was 11, 12, 13, where he's building battery packs in his home, to getting curious about music sets, to building amplifiers, to building transmitters, and putting all of those together for a greater good. A good slightly beyond himself. So we want to train our youth to have curiosity, sustained curiosity, because it's only through that that we learn. And it's not about the things we're curious about leading to a very definitive answer. Not just yet. It's about that weaving and bubbling. That's what it is. It's not about the where it takes us, because where it takes us we don't know by definition. It's built on empathy. It's built on being able to feel, well, if it's about your life, if you've experienced it, you certainly feel it. There's the part where we try to understand and feel what's happening in other people's lives. It's a difficult characteristic, and we must have our youth learn it. But it's very different when it's about our life, when it's about our community, when it's our mother and our auntie who passed away. And in this team that's developing a water and sanitation project, Adama and her team, 2 years earlier, there was a cholera outbreak in Sierra Leone, and she lost some of her family members. So she understood what it meant that water and sanitation and hygiene for young people, or for anybody really, mattered, and it was about life and death. So she was able to convince other members of her school and her team to develop solutions that will mean young people will wash their hands every time they were in school. But most importantly, they formed a group that went from village to village, community to community, to build fences around each well, to cement each well with the community members, and to have a program and learning initiative where young people were also teaching others and their elders in their community about the importance of water and sanitation and its impact to health. You do this, you give the opportunity for youth to experience this when we encourage them to do things not just for themselves, but for the good of others. Because it's only when you are thinking about the solution and how it affects some other people and how they will accept it, it's only when you're willing to do that can you truly start to be empathetic. It's important for us that the young people we interact with are collaborating with each other. That's why there's the requirement that they work on teams. That's why anybody can do, well, anybody. If you really want to, as an individual, you can go and figure out and learn on your own, in your corner, and build something that maybe has some impact for a lot of other people. But if we want to solve the problems that are community-wide, that impact other people's lives, whether it be my sister, whether it be my school, whether it be my church, whether it be my neighborhood, we have to be able to understand and have collaboration and have conversations that are respectful and open. And in those conversations where we are open to being wrong, where we're engaging with you and I'm talking to you and I say, oh, I have an idea. I think if we just move one of these chairs slightly over there, somebody, whatever that idea might be, as irrelevant as it might be, I want to know, I want you to understand that I could be wrong. And you should have the freedom and courage to tell me that, David, no, that's BS. I don't think you should do that. That doesn't really make sense. And I could resist and learn, or I could accept it and try your idea, and then we realize, your idea was actually more BS than mine. I think we should go back to this other idea that I had originally. That only comes when there's collaboration. And this team of girls from the A team in Kenya, this was from the 2013 challenge. They're called the A team, and their joke is, we're not A because we're awesome, we're A because of animals, but yes, we're awesome too. But what they do is they have this project where everybody talks about the challenges that animals face in wildlife. If you like elephants, you will know how major it is a problem. In East Africa especially. And what do? They sit down, their backgrounds are in economics, their background is not in coding and computer science, but they love animals enough, they love elephants enough. Tracy wants her children to be able to still go to the game parks and see elephants enough that she and her colleagues developed a team to build a sensor that would detect when people went into a game park. To do that, they are not just collaborating with each other and with a team with a very specific park in Savo where they went and tested their idea. They're also collaborating with PhD students at the MIT Media Lab. One of the things we've been able to do is to kind of bridge this gap between novice learners and experts, is where we have Tracy and her team talk to Artem at the Responsive Environments group and with other people who are building more sophisticated sensors that require less energy, that can stay in the wild, and who understand the physics. Because it's in that process of dialogue and exchange, it's in that process that Tracy and her team are learning about the physics behind what it means to be, what line of sight is, and why it's important in the case where you're trying to build an invisible wall of sensors that detect when somebody breaks that path. It is in that process that they are learning how to code on Arduinos and use processing and to build prototypes that they can test and evaluate. So it's really important for us. It's really fundamental that we're able to collaborate not just amongst the team members, but across as well with other team members who have expertise that we don't have. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel when we could apply solutions from other fields to the work that we want to do. But why do we do all of this? Why does it matter the kids are empathetic? Why does it matter the kids are thinking about challenges in their community. Why? And that's because in a continent like Africa, where 60% of the population are youth and below 30, where in many parts of our countries, right, in Sierra Leone, I think there's about 70% of the people are under 30. It is imperative that our youth understand how to be the leaders who can problem solve. We are not trying to have another generation of leadership who are writing and making policies from the pulpit. We are trying to have a generation of leaders who can problem solve, who understand what it means to have a question that they don't know the answer to, who understand what it means to have a hypothesis that they want to evaluate and test, who understand how to have a conversation about building a business. That's why. And so when Tom and his team, who participated in the Innovate Kenya 2013, to form Green Char, a company, and what they wanted to do was to build and manufacture charcoal from green waste, not from trees. They care about climate change, they care about trees, they care about indoor smoking, because his grandmother cooks and in his home there's indoor smoking. They care about all of those things. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to create an enterprise and a business and opportunity that creates a company like Tom and his teams have done that employs 12 people. You want to be able to have products out into the world that will immediately affect somebody's lives. There are multiple pathways of doing that. We can say, hey Tom, hey all you and your team, you should do this project-based learning, and you should go to college and spend 4 years, and at the end of those 4 years you probably get a job to secure something, and when you do that, then you can come and begin thinking about problem solutions. That's a pathway that many people do and take. It's great, but it's not the pathway that's going to have the transformational leadership and the transformational action that we need today. And so what pathway do they choose to take after going through this experience? Not one we impose. It's a pathway that has Tom at 19 saying, we've built this company now over the last year with $1,500 and the mentorship that you gave to us and the podium to talk about this at the Rockefeller Foundation's Innovation Award. It's been a great year. I have amazing excellence scores from high school. I could go to college. But I feel like I want to develop this business a little bit longer. I think I'm going to take a year off. And in that year off, I'm going to build and establish a business with 3 of my colleagues. One is part-time in school, and another who went to South Africa. I was able to convince to come back home from his medical school in South Africa to build this enterprise with me. And today, I am the youngest ever Echoing Green winner with $100,000 raised in the last couple of months. And most recently, a Forbes 30 under 30 social entrepreneur. That pathway does not involve anybody telling Tom what he should do. He did not create this enterprise to get all of those awards. He created this enterprise because he understood the challenges that his grandmother faced. He understood the realities of climate change that affects Kenya. And most importantly, he wants to build an enterprise that provides not just for himself, but for the 13 other people he's hired. In that experience, everything doesn't go as smooth as it is. My fiancé and I were visiting Kenya recently, and we met Tom. And I said, so tell me, Tom and his team, they showed us the office, wonderful. Hey, tell me, what's the 2 biggest things you've learned so far? What are the challenges? And he laughs. Tom is the tall gentleman in black, by the way, sorry. And he says, well, one of the things that we've learned is that you have to take some officials out for lunch. He knows that now by 19, so I guess he's always going to have a budget for lunch in his business deals. But that's because, it's not because he's going to bribe the official, it's because he understands that the most important conversations are not just happening when we go, hey, nice to meet you, have a seat, let's talk about this business deal. But they come out in conversations in the hallway and perhaps a conversation over lunch. That level of leadership, that level of understanding other people's emotions and other people's relation to us, you don't teach that in a school. You have to create the opportunity for youth to experience that. And you only do that when you give them the freedom to learn and experience that leadership. We don't teach it. You create an opportunity for you to experience it. All of this is great and all. And in Sierra Leone, many of our solutions from Sierra Leone have involved a team that was doing a school feeding program because the donor that funded the school for the school feeding program cut the funding. So they formed a relationship with the community to build the farm. And the lady who runs it is an amazing lady, runs this set of schools called Educate. And the students developed a farm with the community members that they then use all the produce from the farm to feed the school and other kids in the community, and sell the extra to buy produce that they don't have. But there's also an element where you're learning technical skills. You're going through all this experience in the innovation challenge that Jimin is running. And we thought, you know, it's also a wonderful thing to have a space, a safe space called the Innovation Labs in Labs, which came as a byproduct of seeing that young people did not have the technical skills necessary, not many of them had, to take and solve and tackle these big challenges. So we started the Innovation Labs, where it was a space that young people can come to explore, to mess around, to geek out, to take risks and to learn stuff that they didn't know they wanted to learn. And we did this in Prince of Wales, and Mohammed Haddon is one of my favorite mentees. And how I met Mohammed is an interesting experience too. I tell you about his product just now. He knew I was going back home. He knew I was coming back to Sierra Leone because I probably put it on Facebook or something. And he also knew the church that I attended. So he knew what mass. He asked around and knew what mass and what time I'll be there. So he came to that mass, waited for me after service, and bumped into me randomly like, oh, it's great to see you, David. And we had a conversation in which he tells me about all his robots that he's making. And a conversation that led to him taking MIT open courseware classes that he knew all the numbers to that I didn't even know. But he became a leader in the Innovation Lab at Prince of Wales, where he encouraged other young people, he mentored other young people in the same way I had this relationship with him, to participate and learn and build and develop technologies that was important to them. Here he has his reading glass, as he calls it, modeled after the Google Glass, which, if you're following the news, is being discontinued. And he got this experience when he and I went to Google, actually. I brought him to SciFu. Again, the youngest members who were at SciFu. And he went home and built a reading glass. And why does it matter that he has a reading glass? It matters because it doesn't have lights every day. It matters because candles and lamps on kerosene lamps are not the safest, are not the most reliable, are not the most convenient either to read on. So he has and built the technical capacity to say, oh, I like that product, but I never will use it in the way it's been used. How will I use something like that? And so he develops the skills required to build a lamp that he calls the reading glasses. You could have gone to any store and bought a headlamp and donated it to Muhammad. And they all have done the same thing. But the difference there is that today, in the last Maker Fair Africa, he was doing a workshop, because he's now at the African Leadership Academy. He did a workshop where dozens of youth came to learn how to make the reading glasses. He will not have that capability to be a teacher today if he didn't experience what it meant to build one for himself, or to build two for himself, or to lead a workshop at the lab that we had for him in Sierra Leone. It's that level of leadership we want young people to have, where they are not only building their own technical capabilities, but they have the mastery enough from the experience that they have gone through, such that they can teach other people. Not many teachers are liked by their students. Age gap maybe, I don't know. But many students like their peers. And the best way for them to learn is with their peers. And so a great way then to have a lot of people get some skill is by empowering our youth within our classrooms to be the ones who are co-teaching with us. It's a facilitation. I bet you didn't think you were going to do a quiz when you came here this morning. What's the square root of 20? Swords 101. There's Ebola in Sierra Leone today, you all know. And there's no school for the last 8 months. They just announced yesterday that schools might open in March. And so, in a place where there's about 2 million kids who don't have access to school for 8 months, which I think is perhaps a larger problem than the health crisis, but that's separate. What do? Well, you wait for 6 months before you do anything and just tell the kids to hang out at home. But that's how you solve that problem. If I told you how to solve it, it probably didn't make sense. I would have said square, it wouldn't have made sense. But that's what that is. If you are a kid in Sierra Leone who's learning swords, here's how you will learn it. May we have the audio, please?
And subtract swords which are alike. That is, the numbers under the square root are the same. The numbers under the square root are the same.
You should be taking notes.
In general, 1 m, the square root of k, plus n, the square root of k, is equal to m plus n in bracket times the square root of k.
How many people went to sleep on that one? That is how, and that is the solution that kids have for 1 hour a day to learn math. So what do we do? What do we as an organization, GMIN, do? Because this is certainly not any way anybody would want to learn. My team developed what we call Hack at Home. The kids can't go to school. Kids are hanging out at the house. Why not have them hack and problem solve? Why not have them do design challenges and do project-based learning at home and use the mentorship of their peers, use the mentorship of their parents, have some fellows go meet them, submit their ideas on Facebook and WhatsApp, because this is where they're hanging out anyway. Why not engage the kids on the platform where they are and have them learn and problem solve solutions that are much bigger than themselves? Today on the Hack at Home platform, on the WhatsApp groups and on the Facebook groups, we have about 800 kids that we're engaging actively who over every period of time, every 2 weeks, are given a design challenge, and they have to go back and develop it, submit it, get feedback on those, and implement it. This is the first design challenge. Obvious. Create an Ebola message. Be creative about it. Some of the solutions we had, kids made music, some of my favorite ones. Kids made signs that were hung out in their communities. They made t-shirts, they made designs, they made poems and wrote poems that were shared. And it was about saying, no, kids, we're not telling you to go home and sit down and perhaps you don't even have anything to do. I just heard that actually, I forgot the number, but a significant amount of kids, women, are actually pregnant, girls, during this period. But instead of just going to doing that stuff, why don't you engage in problem solving in one way or the other? But without it just stopping at your pen, without it just stopping in your room, we will help you bring out this message to the community. And hence, for these winners of the first challenge, there are 3 winners always. We encourage everybody to actually publish their ideas, and we share it widely and discuss their ideas. They are able to hang out their message in different points across the country, in Freetown, particularly this one here. The second challenge was about designing personal protective equipment. Everybody knows about the challenges of personal protective equipment, and you get transmissions because it's just difficult, and it's God knows a million steps to wear them and take them off, and you always make a mistake, and they're expensive and you can't reuse them. So we had a challenge. Can you design yourself some? We had tons and tons of solutions that were coming from the youth. You know why that's important? It's important because in all of this mess, the place where hackathons were happening, we do hackathons, but where hackathons were happening, funded by USAID, funded by other people, it's great, and it's a global problem, and we all have a responsibility to solve it, and we should be open and be respectful to the world. But you want to do that in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, so that the youth and the people and the researchers are getting the experience of developing a new PPE. Why have a hackathon in NYU or in USAID and not have one in Sierra Leone? The dialogue and the responsibilities that we have to enable other people, to enable youth to problem solve, require that we step back, understand what we do, what our roles are, and allow young people globally to learn and problem solve. But why? It's that in 10 years, the generation of young people who we have in Sierra Leone, in Kenya, in Orlando, in Boston, in wherever you are, in Roxbury, is that those generation of young people are leaders who understand how to be curious, how to be empathetic, how to develop solutions that are slightly bigger than themselves. I have also said this many times, and many of us believe it's not about the product, it's about the process. You know, it doesn't matter what the person do. Maybe it does. Maybe it does matter that we teach our young people today that the final product has to have some social value, that we don't just live in this world by ourselves, that we share and the things that we do affect other people. Maybe it does to actually tell young people that what they do and what they make matters. We can keep the process the same, but what they make matters. Thank you very much. I had forgotten to mention that there were mics up here, And I know you have lots of questions and lots of comments. And there are 2 mics straight up the aisle. Feel free to step up with any questions and comments. The first 2 people get a cookie.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think about what these kids are doing, the amputees, the kid who designed, the young woman who designed the program for water at the schools for washing hands, and I think that their experiences are things that would teach a lot of other people, right? Do you know of any efforts to get their stories out, say in videos that could be used to help kids here or anywhere, so that those kids also know that they can teach too?
That's a great question. Yes, we are trying to do that. One of the things that members of our organization do is try to elevate the stories of kids. And if you actually on YouTube search, I don't know, MIT, 15-year-old wows MIT, there's a story and a nice video of Kelvin when he came to visit me. I think that's been viewed some 7 million times. And it's interesting where I can go to, I don't know, Mexico, and some random kid will come up and be like, oh, you were that guy who was with DJ Focus. And he knows, and other young people know. But I think it's really important what you mentioned, which is that the solutions can also come from these young people. That is not just that we're teaching them and giving them the tools required to problem solve, but the experiences and the resilience that they go through, whether it's by growing up, in his case, with a single mother and in a place that was as tight and congestive, and he had to get the tools from recycled parts and bring it to his home, and his room is a huge mess of parts from everywhere, from the garbage that he uses to put this together. That's an experience that we ourselves can learn from. And I think we're trying our level best to share their stories and give them the platform to be the ones who share their stories as well. One cookie gun. I see a second one. Many more people can still, you can just line up at the mic. You don't have to wait until I call out.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for sharing. So I'm principal of a school in Manhattan, a founder, and I opened the schools so that kids could reclaim their right to ask questions. And we work a lot together as a team, collaborating on passion-based learning and student voice and student choice. And what I'm finding is students are distracted by what they think are the comforts that they have. You know, they're distracted by their sneakers and jackets and Facebook. And when we give them the opportunity to ask why, they've been in school for 11 years or 9 years when they come to us, and school teaches them not to ask why. It teaches them to have the right answer, not the question. Like, I think schools could be closed for 8 months. That might be a good thing. I'm a principal. I shouldn't say where. Anyway, so my question to you is, do you think the asking why comes from the environment, comes from internally? Can it be taught? That's my first question. I guess there's 3 of them. And my second question is, would you want to come to a high school in an urban area and spend the day asking questions? No answers of you, just asking questions.
That's a great question, and thanks very much for that. I think maybe we don't teach kids how to ask why. We should just let them continue asking why. I think typically we remove that capability from them. Every kid, I don't have a kid, but I'm sure for the people who have kids in here, I'm sure they'll tell you that their kids ask why a million times. But what we should stop doing as teachers and as parents is saying, oh, I don't know. Oh, just don't bother asking. And what that does is we are removing that curiosity from kids without knowing that we're doing that. In school, in class, the experience and the relationship we have with teachers, the more questions you ask, the more unknowing of a kid you are, and you get a bad rep with your peers as well. And so I don't think about it as how we can teach kids to ask why. It's more we should refrain from unteaching them. We should refrain from having them not ask questions through the methods that we do. I don't know how you will teach them to ask why without just challenging them too, without in these what you're doing, which is the project-based learning, by saying go figure out what's going on in your community, in your life, and come back and tell me. In that process, before you come to the solution, you have to have asked a series of whys, and it becomes a habit, right? So I think about it more as make it a habit that kids are questioning why they do what they do, such that it just is on impulse. It's just their intuition that drives them.
And what about coming to the school?
Like one or anyone?
You coming to my school.
Sure.
I'm a block away from Google.
Perfect. You have my details. You can
Okay.
send me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You may have addressed this earlier and I missed the first part, but in asking why, what I'm noticing, and I teach second graders, is that children are afraid to fail. They're afraid to ask those questions. They're afraid to problem solve, really to put themselves out there because they have that fear of failure. And I feel like that is like a major stumbling block in encouraging them to problem solve, because they feel if they put the effort into it and it fails, then they are in turn a failure. So how do you encourage them to ask why and to put themselves out there, and that it's okay to fail? How do you continually encourage that when it feels like in today's society that's not what's encouraged?
Why do you think kids...
Like, how do you do that?
I know, but I'm asking, why do you think kids are afraid to fail?
You know, that's like an over-ending question. I don't know. I don't have the answer to it. But as I teach, you know, year after year, and I do a ton of problem-based learning, the first major hump is not usually having them ask the questions of why. It's having them get over that hump of, oh, but what if I do this and I fail? Then how do I keep going?
What grade is it?
I have second.
Second grade. They're already afraid.
Yes.
I think part of the reason is I was gonna say that actually school is what the way school is what makes kids become afraid, and the way the parents are these days. You know, I didn't failing wasn't so much. It didn't matter whether you failed in some way, right? Not like you got an F. But it didn't matter whether you tore your shirt. It didn't matter whether you broke your pencil or you broke something. But we feel like, I feel, the issue is with a lot of kids from when they're younger, we tell them what the right thing to do is. They are reprimanded for doing the wrong thing. And the wrong thing might just be them asking questions. The wrong thing might just them being exploring. Because we limit how kids explore, because we tell them that no, that is wrong, that is a wrong approach, because from a very early age, I think, we tell them, I have a niece when I'm home. My relationship with my niece is much different from the relationship she has with other people. It's okay if she does something silly with me. It's okay if she's been frisky, because she's learning. It's very different with other people next to her. She has to do a very specific thing. With me, she can ask why. She can challenge herself and do all this silly stuff that other people will reprimand her for. So I don't... All right, so there's one part. The first part is what we do to kids early on, make them be afraid to ask why. And so the first part of that is to say, in your classroom, it's okay if things break. It's okay if we don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. It's okay if we fail. Don't ask me for the answer. I'm going to ask you for the answer. We should make it okay that they don't know. So if we make it okay that they don't know from our homes, from first grade through, I think it becomes a much, much different thing, actually. I think it's more that our systems and the fact that, right, so one example, when kids come to class, you have to sit in the line. They have to sit exactly and do whatever it is that kids do in school. They can't, if they do something else, we tell them, no, that's bad. You're already telling them that, oh, you know, there's this very specific way in which they have to do something. Even in our project-based learning things, they're so regimented. You have to come, put your book down, and then you go get your device, and then you go get this. It's so orderly that I will get stressed from just being in such an environment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stella, and I'm from Okeechobee, Florida. I teach 4th grade, science, math, and Spanish. First of all, I want to say thank you. Your story was very inspiring to me. This is my why question, and after that why question, I have another question that came to my mind is, why is it possible that these innovation labs are being made in third world countries and not in a city like mine that's in one of the richest countries? So what inspired me is that I want to go back to my city and say, okay, we need to do something like this, because I do see that in my students. I am a teacher that has taught them from day one, we learn from our mistakes. It's okay to make those mistakes. So I do have a lot of why questions in my classroom. And I always tell them and give them the example of Albert Einstein. Before he ever discovered what he discovered, he made several mistakes and he had to do several trials. So my question is, if I'm at a starting point, what is your advice for me? I want to take your idea back home. What's my first step?
It's a difficult question. I think the first step, after you've decided that you want to do this, because that's a huge one, the decision itself that I want to do this. The first step after you've decided that you want to do this, I will say embeds in doing it with other people, right? Embeds in getting a buy-in, whether it's from 1, 2, 3 other people, because it can't be just us who do it, right? It can't be just the one person with a great idea. It's going to be much more challenging unless you have a buy-in from your peers, unless you have a buy-in from your partner, from whoever it is. I think that's very important, and quite often we tend to overlook it, because to implement stuff like this requires other people. And I would say get a buy-in from other people who you will do this with. But once you have that, there will be, you know this already, but there'll be a lot of people who will say, but why don't you start smaller? But why don't you do this? But why don't you do it in the other way? But why? The but whys can also be negative. And the question is, I think the biggest question for us and for myself and for everybody is figuring out which but whys should we pay attention to, and which but whys should be ones we used to explore. An example, when I was going to do Innovate Sierra Leone at first, we had, I don't know, $2,500. And we're going to go all over the country and get every district. But why do you do that? Why not just do it in Freetown? But why wouldn't you just do it in Prince of Wales in one school? It will never have been the same. And so there's the element of figuring out which we want to listen to. And I think but why, the curiosity that comes from ourselves should supersede the ones that are coming from other people. It's very different from listening and having a conversation though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 10 seconds to go. You can ask the question.
Okay, if that's a good amount of time. Thank you, and you sort of answered my question before, but I wanted to ask, as you set out to make global change on this sort of scale, what are some things that, like the most critical things you feel like you need to have in place to sustain momentum when you have pushback? So you kind of talked to that a little bit, but what are some things that you need to have in place when you get that pushback so that you can continue the momentum for change?
It's a great question. I think it's related to the very first question we had, actually. It's about sharing those stories. And not just stories of success, stories of challenges. It's about making the other young people know that, oh, look, I don't know, Tom screwed up in this, or Tom is a silly person, look at this gaffe that Tom made. But oh, Tom is also a 19-year-old who runs a $100,000 company, right? It's the momentum comes from sharing those stories and pausing and appreciating those stories. For me personally, I think it really is about when I can share the stories of these young people. It's amazing to me. I'm proud of them. I am proud more of what they have done than anything that GMIN has done. GMIN is just a facilitator. It's about their stories. It's about seeing these kids who on day one you're talking to them and they don't get it. It's like, yeah, that's I don't know, we can't do this. And then 1 year later they are addressing 2,000 people in the UN, right? That level, and we just had a 16 and 117-year-old come to a conference in California with us. Before they went on stage, and in this whole process, they're nervous. They're like, I don't know how we can do this. This is hard. You could tell they're nervous. And then they go on stage and wow everybody, and it's giving them that experience. So for me, I get, in the tough times, it's knowing that Tom, is knowing that Leroy, is knowing that Bonolo, is knowing that Adama and all those young kids have their lives changed in some way, not because I said so, but because they said so. So it's about sharing their stories. It's about giving them a platform to grow and pausing and saying, this is cool. This is a very cool thing. Thank you very much.